The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William adjusted his navy blue suit jacket one final time. Today was different from their usual royal engagements. Today, they were visiting a place that would test every ounce of their emotional strength. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood beside her husband, her elegant cream-colored coat perfectly pressed, but her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her small pearl earrings. She had been preparing for this visit for weeks, yet nothing could have truly prepared her for what they were about to witness. The couple had received a letter 3 months earlier from a charity organization working with children in crisis situations. The letter described a special facility that housed children who had been rescued from the most unimaginable circumstances. These were not ordinary children in need. These were young souls who had endured trauma that would break most adults. William walked to the window and gazed out at the perfectly manicured gardens. His mind wandered to his own children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, who were at that very moment probably having breakfast, laughing over silly jokes, and planning their day ahead. The contrast between his children's blessed lives and what they were about to see weighed heavily on his heart. Catherine joined him at the window, placing her hand gently on his arm. She understood his thoughts without words. As parents themselves, they both knew that this visit would challenge them in ways their previous royal duties never had. The charity had specifically requested their presence because the children they cared for had lost all hope. Many had been abandoned by families who could no longer care for them due to poverty, illness, or circumstances beyond their control. Others had been rescued from situations so dire that the social workers who found them still struggled to sleep at night. Their private secretary, James, knocked softly on the door before entering. His usually cheerful demeanor was more subdued today. Even he, who had arranged hundreds of royal visits, seemed affected by the nature of this particular engagement. "Your Royal Highnesses," he began quietly, "the car is ready. The facility director, Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, will meet you at the entrance. She wanted me to mention that some of the children may not respond well initially. They've experienced so much disappointment that they've learned not to trust adults, even kind ones." Catherine nodded, her green eyes already glistening with unshed tears. She had spent hours the night before thinking about how to approach these children. How do you comfort a child who has lost everything? How do you bring hope to someone so young who has already seen the worst of humanity? The drive to the facility was unusually quiet. Usually, William and Catherine would discuss their approach, review the names of people they would meet, or share light conversation to ease any pre-visit nerves. But today, both were lost in their own thoughts, preparing their hearts for what lay ahead. The facility was located in a modest building on the outskirts of London. From the outside, it looked like any other community center: red brick walls, simple windows, and a small garden area. But inside these walls lived 23 children whose stories would forever change how William and Catherine viewed their roles as royals and as human beings. Mrs. Mitchell, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, met them at the entrance. She had dedicated her entire adult life to helping children in crisis, and her gentle but strong presence immediately put the royal couple at ease. "Your Royal Highnesses, thank you for coming," she said with genuine warmth. "Before we go inside, I want you to know that some of these children have never experienced unconditional love. Some flinch when adults reach out to them. Others haven't spoken in months. Please don't take any reactions personally or lack thereof. Your presence here today, regardless of their immediate response, means more than you'll ever know." William cleared his throat, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're honored to be here. We've come not as royals fulfilling a duty, but as people who want to understand how we can truly help." As they walked through the entrance hall, Catherine noticed the walls were decorated with children's drawings. But these weren't typical cheerful pictures of houses with smiling suns. These drawings told stories of pain, fear, and longing. One picture showed a small figure standing alone under dark clouds. Another depicted a child reaching toward a bright light in the distance. The first room they entered was the common area where several children were engaged in quiet activities. The moment William and Catherine stepped inside, every child looked up, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and caution. In the corner sat a little girl, no more than 7 years old, with tangled blonde hair and clothes that were clean but clearly hand-me-downs. She was clutching a worn stuffed rabbit so tightly that her knuckles were white. When she saw the visitors, she immediately looked down at her feet. Mrs. Mitchell whispered to Catherine, "That's Emma. She was found living alone in an abandoned building. Her mother disappeared 6 months ago, and Emma had been surviving on scraps of food from nearby restaurants. She hasn't spoken since we brought her here 5 weeks ago. Catherine felt her heart skip a beat. The little girl was roughly the same age as her own daughter, Charlotte. Without thinking, Catherine slowly approached Emma, being careful not to make any sudden movements. "Hello, sweetheart," Catherine said softly, kneeling down to Emma's level. "I love your rabbit. What's his name?" Emma looked up briefly, her big blue eyes meeting Catherine's for just a moment before she looked away again. But, in that brief connection, Catherine saw something that nearly broke her heart completely. A flicker of hope desperately trying to survive in a world that had shown this child nothing but abandonment. William, meanwhile, had been drawn to a group of older children, boys around 10 and 11 years old, who were sitting at a table working on a puzzle together. But, as he approached, he noticed something unusual about their interaction. They weren't talking to each other, weren't laughing or joking the way children their age typically would. They worked in complete silence, each focused solely on their individual pieces. "These boys came to us together," Mrs. Mitchell explained to William. "They're brothers, Marcus, David, and little Tommy. Their parents died in a car accident 8 months ago. They have no other family, and they've been in 3 different foster homes that didn't work out. They've learned to rely only on each other. They're afraid that if they get attached to anyone else, they'll lose them too." William watched as the eldest brother, Marcus, carefully guided his youngest brother Tommy's hand to help him place a puzzle piece. The protective way Marcus looked after his siblings reminded William of his own relationship with Harry when they were growing up, especially after their mother's death. But these boys were facing something even more challenging, complete uncertainty about their future. As the visit continued, William and Catherine met more children, each with a story that seemed impossible for such young hearts to bear. There was Aisha, a 9-year-old girl from Syria whose family had fled their war-torn country, only to face tragedy upon tragedy during their journey to safety. She was the only survivor in her family and spoke no English, communicating only through drawings that depicted scenes no child should ever witness. There was James, a teenager who had aged out of multiple foster care situations and found himself homeless at 16. Despite everything he had endured, he spent his time at the facility helping the younger children with their homework and making sure they felt safe. The emotional weight of each story began to accumulate in both William and Catherine's hearts. They had attended countless charity events, visited hospitals, and met with people facing various challenges throughout their royal duties. But something about seeing such profound need in children, beings who should be protected and cherished, struck them at their very core. As they moved through the facility, visiting the small bedrooms where the children slept, the basic kitchen where simple meals were prepared, and the single bathroom that 23 children shared, the reality of the situation became overwhelming. Catherine excused herself for a moment, stepping into a small office area where she thought she could compose herself. But the moment she was alone, the tears she had been holding back began to flow freely. The image of little Emma clutching her stuffed rabbit, the silent brothers working their puzzle, the teenager James caring for children when he himself needed care, it all crashed over her at once. William found her there a few minutes later, and, seeing his wife's tears, he felt his own emotional walls beginning to crumble. They stood together in that small office, holding each other as the magnitude of what they had witnessed began to sink in. Outside the office, they could hear the quiet sounds of the facility, children's footsteps, whispered conversations, the gentle voice of Mrs. Mitchell offering comfort to someone who was crying. These sounds represented lives hanging in the balance, futures that remained uncertain, and childhood innocence that had been shattered far too early. When they finally composed themselves enough to rejoin the group, both William and Catherine knew that this visit had changed them forever. They were no longer just observing a problem from the comfortable distance of their royal positions. They had looked directly into the eyes of suffering children and felt their pain as if it were their own. The morning was only half over, and they still had more children to meet, more stories to hear, and more heartbreak to witness. But they also knew that walking away was not an option. These children needed more than sympathy. They needed action, hope, and the assurance that someone with the power to make a difference truly cared about their futures. After their brief moment of emotional release in the office, William and Catherine returned to the main area with renewed determination. Mrs. Mitchell was waiting with a gentle, understanding smile, as if she had witnessed this transformation in visitors many times before. "Would you like to visit our art therapy room?" she asked softly. Some of the children find it easier to express themselves through colors and drawings rather than words. The art therapy room was filled with natural light from large windows that overlooked a small garden. The walls were covered with artwork created by the children, some pieces vibrant and hopeful, others dark and haunting. Each piece told a story that words could never fully capture. In the center of the room sat a girl about 12 years old with dark curly hair, completely absorbed in her painting. Her name was Maria, and she had been at the facility for 4 months after being rescued from a human trafficking situation that had torn her away from her family in Eastern Europe. Catherine approached Maria's easel and gasped softly. The painting showed a small bird trapped in a cage, but, in the distance, there was an open window with bright sunlight streaming through. The symbolism was not lost on Catherine. This young girl was expressing her longing for freedom and hope despite her traumatic circumstances. "It's beautiful, Maria," Catherine said gently. "Tell me about your bird." Maria looked up, her dark eyes holding a wisdom that seemed far too mature for her age. In heavily accented English, she whispered, "Bird wants to fly home, but bird forgot where home is." Those simple words hit Catherine with such force that she had to steady herself against the easel. Here was a child who had lost not only her freedom but her very sense of belonging in the world. Maria's home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling of safety and love that had been violently stolen from her. William, meanwhile, had discovered something equally heartbreaking in another corner of the room. A boy named Daniel, who appeared to be about 8 years old, was creating what looked like a family portrait. But, as William looked closer, he noticed that the boy had drawn himself standing far apart from the other figures in the picture. "Is this your family, Daniel?" William asked, sitting down beside the boy. Daniel nodded, but didn't look up from his drawing. "That's my mama, and that's my daddy, and that's my big sister," he said, pointing to each figure. "But I can't live with them anymore because Mama gets sick in her head sometimes and forgets to take care of me." William's heart clenched as he realized Daniel was describing a situation where his mother likely suffered from mental illness, making it unsafe for him to remain at home. The boy's drawing showed his deep love for his family alongside his painful understanding that love alone wasn't enough to keep them together. "Why are you standing so far away in the picture?" William asked gently. Daniel finally looked up, his young face etched with confusion and sadness. "Because I don't know where I belong anymore. I love my family, but the social worker says I can't go back. And I want to find a new family, but what if they don't really want me?" The innocence of the question, combined with its profound sadness, left William momentarily speechless. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the adults who should protect them can't, through no fault of the child's own? Across the room, Catherine had moved on to meet twins, Sophie and Sarah, who were 10 years old. The girls were working together on a large mural that depicted a house with many rooms. Mrs. Mitchell explained that the twins had been separated multiple times in the foster care system because many families were only able to take one child. The trauma of separation had been so severe that the girls now refused to sleep in different rooms, even at the facility. "We're building our dream house," Sophie explained to Catherine with the first genuine smile the princess had seen all day. "In our house, families never get separated, and there are enough bedrooms for everyone who needs a home," Sarah added. "And there's a big kitchen where everyone can eat together, and nobody ever goes hungry." The simplicity of their dreams, safety, togetherness, and enough food struck Catherine as both beautiful and heartbreaking. These children weren't asking for luxury or extravagance. They just wanted the basic human needs that her own children took for granted every single day. As the afternoon progressed, William and Catherine continued to meet more children, each encounter adding another layer to their understanding of the crisis these young lives represented. They met Ahmed, a 15-year-old refugee who had walked across multiple countries to escape violence, only to discover that being a minor alone in a new country brought its own set of seemingly impossible challenges. They met Lucy, a 13-year-old girl whose parents had died from drug overdoses, leaving her to care for her younger siblings until social services intervened. Despite losing her childhood to premature responsibilities, Lucy spent her time at the facility helping other children with their homework and making sure everyone felt included in group activities. Perhaps most heart-wrenching was their encounter with baby Michael, who was only 18 months old. He had been found abandoned at a hospital with a note from his mother saying she loved him, but couldn't provide the care he needed due to her own mental health struggles and addiction issues. Michael had spent more time in institutional care than in a family home, and the effects were already visible in his delayed development and reluctance to bond with caregivers. William held Michael for a few minutes, and the baby's tiny hand grasped onto his finger with surprising strength. In that moment, William thought about his own children's early years, the countless bedtime stories, the family dinners, the simple joy of tucking them in each night. Michael had never experienced any of those basic expressions of love and security. Mrs. Mitchell noticed the prince's emotional response to holding Michael. "He's one of our success stories, actually," she said softly. "A family has expressed interest in adopting him. They've been going through the approval process for several months now. With any luck, he'll have a permanent home soon." The word permanent struck both William and Catherine powerfully. For these children, permanence was not something to be taken for granted. It was a precious gift that many of them had never experienced. The temporary nature of their living situations meant that just as they began to feel safe and start healing, they might be moved again, restarting the process of trying to trust and attach to new caregivers. As the day continued, William and Catherine began to understand that the facility, despite the loving care provided by Mrs. Mitchell and her staff, was never intended to be a permanent solution. It was a bridge, a safe place for children to heal while waiting for families who could provide the long-term love and stability they desperately needed. The reality was sobering. There were thousands of children like these throughout the country, and not enough families willing or able to provide the specialized care that many of these children required. Some had medical needs, others had behavioral challenges resulting from trauma, and many simply needed patient, consistent love to help them learn to trust again. During lunch, which consisted of simple sandwiches and fruit that the children ate quietly in a small dining area, Catherine noticed something that nearly broke her heart all over again. Several of the children were carefully saving half of their sandwiches, wrapping them in napkins, and tucking them away. When she asked Mrs. Mitchell about this behavior, the explanation was devastating. "Many of these children have experienced severe food insecurity," Mrs. Mitchell explained quietly. "Even though they're fed regularly here and assured that there will always be enough food, the fear of hunger is so deeply ingrained that they can't stop themselves from saving portions for later. Some of them have memories of going days without eating." Catherine watched as little Emma, the girl with the stuffed rabbit, carefully broke her cookie in half and saved one piece in her pocket. The gesture was simultaneously heartbreaking and inspiring. Heartbreaking because it revealed the depth of trauma these children carried, but inspiring because it showed their incredible resilience and survival instincts. After lunch, William and Catherine were invited to observe a group therapy session led by Dr. Patricia Williams, a child psychologist who volunteered her time at the facility. The session was designed to help the children process their experiences and develop coping strategies for their emotions. Watching the session was perhaps the most difficult part of their entire visit. The children sat in a circle, and Dr. Williams used simple techniques to help them identify and express their feelings. When she asked each child to name one thing they missed most, the responses were devastating in their simplicity. Emma whispered, "I miss my mommy reading me stories." Marcus, the eldest of the three brothers, said, "I miss feeling like I could protect my brothers from bad things." Maria, the girl who had painted the caged bird, shared, "I miss knowing what tomorrow will bring." Each response revealed not just what these children had lost, but what every child deserves to have: predictability, protection, love, and hope for the future. As the therapy session concluded and the children dispersed to their afternoon activities, William and Catherine found themselves once again struggling to maintain their composure. They had arrived that morning thinking they understood what poverty and need looked like, but seeing it through the eyes of children who should have been worried about homework and playground games instead of where they would sleep next or whether they would ever see their families again, had fundamentally changed their perspective. The afternoon was drawing to a close, but the most challenging part of their visit was yet to come. Mrs. Mitchell had saved the most difficult cases for last, wanting to give William and Catherine time to emotionally prepare. What they were about to see would test not only their emotional strength, but their faith in humanity itself. The final part of their visit took William and Catherine to a quieter section of the facility where the most vulnerable children stayed. Mrs. Mitchell led them down a hallway lined with photographs of former residents who had successfully found permanent homes, smiling faces that represented hope and healing. "Before we continue," Mrs. Mitchell said, pausing outside a particular door, I want you to meet someone very special. Her name is Grace, and she's been with us for almost a year. Grace is different from the other children you've met today. She was born with severe disabilities, and her birth parents felt unable to care for her properly. What makes Grace's story particularly heartbreaking is that potential adoptive families have visited her dozens of times. But when they learn about the extent of care she requires, they choose other children. Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. As a mother, she couldn't imagine walking away from any child in need. But she also understood the reality that caring for a child with severe disabilities required resources, time, and emotional strength that not every family possessed. They entered a sunny room where Grace lay in a specialized bed surrounded by medical equipment. She was 7 years old, but appeared much smaller due to her condition. Despite her physical limitations, her eyes were bright and alert, and when she saw the visitors, she attempted a smile that lit up her entire face. A nurse named Janet was caring for Grace, adjusting her feeding tube with practiced gentleness. Grace understands everything that's said to her, Janet explained. She just can't communicate back in traditional ways. But watch her eyes. They tell you everything you need to know about what's going on in her mind. Catherine approached Grace's bedside slowly. The little girl's eyes followed her movement with curiosity and interest. When Catherine gently took Grace's hand, the child's eyes sparkled with what could only be described as joy. "Hello, beautiful girl," Catherine whispered. "I'm so happy to meet you." Grace's response was subtle but unmistakable. Her breathing became more relaxed, and her grip on Catherine's hand tightened slightly. In that moment, Catherine realized that despite Grace's disabilities, she was experiencing the same fundamental human need for connection and love as every other child. William stood beside them, watching the interaction with tears forming in his eyes. Grace turned her attention to him, and he could see intelligence and personality shining through her gaze. She was not defined by her disabilities. She was a complete person deserving of love, care, and dignity. "How long has Grace been waiting for a family?" William asked quietly. Janet's expression grew somber. 7 years. Since birth. Her medical needs are complex, and potential families often feel overwhelmed by the commitment required. But Grace has so much love to give. She responds to music, enjoys being read to, and has the most beautiful laugh when she finds something amusing. She's taught everyone here about the true meaning of resilience. As if understanding that she was being discussed, Grace made a small sound and moved her eyes between William and Catherine as if she were trying to communicate something important to them. Mrs. Mitchell continued their tour to introduce them to another challenging case. In a corner room, they met Oliver, a 5-year-old boy who had been rescued from a situation of severe neglect. Oliver exhibited behaviors that were both heartbreaking and difficult to manage. He hoarded food under his bed, flinched when anyone approached too quickly, and had nightmares so severe that he rarely slept through the night. The most challenging aspect of Oliver's case was that his behaviors, while completely understandable given his background, made it difficult for foster families to care for him. He had been placed in 4 different homes, and each time, the families had returned him to the system, claiming they weren't prepared for his needs. "Oliver is incredibly intelligent," explained his caseworker, Mark. "But his trauma responses make it difficult for him to function in typical family settings. He needs a family that understands trauma, has patience for his healing process, and can provide the consistent security he's never experienced." Unfortunately, those families are rare. When William tried to approach Oliver, the little boy immediately backed into a corner and put his hands up defensively. The action was so instinctive and fearful that William's heart broke instantly. This child had learned to expect hurt from adults, and his body was in a constant state of readiness to protect himself. "Oliver, these are friends," Mark said gently. "They came to visit because they care about you. No one is going to hurt you." Slowly, Oliver lowered his hands, but his body remained tense. Catherine knelt down at a distance, not wanting to overwhelm him further. "Hi, Oliver," she said softly. "I heard you like trucks. My son George loves trucks too. What's your favorite kind?" For just a moment, Oliver's defensive posture relaxed slightly, and he whispered, "Fire trucks. They help people." The innocence of his answer, his association of trucks with helping rather than hurting, showed that despite everything he had endured, Oliver still held on a hope that there were people in the world who existed to help rather than harm. Their next encounter was with Amelia, a 14-year-old girl who had been in the foster care system since she was 6. Amelia had experienced more placement failures than anyone could reasonably expect a child to endure. Each time she was moved to a new home, she built walls a little higher, trusted a little less, and believed more firmly that she was fundamentally unlovable. Amelia was sitting in the facility's small library, reading a worn copy of a classic novel. When William and Catherine approached, she looked up with eyes that held the wariness of someone much older. "I suppose you're here to hear my sob story like all the other visitors," Amelia said with a bitterness that was devastating coming from someone so young. Catherine sat down across from her, choosing her words carefully. "Actually, we're here because we're trying to understand how we can help. What would you want adults to know about kids in situations like yours?" Amelia studied Catherine's face for signs of insincerity. Finding none, she closed her book and leaned back in her chair. "Adults always promise things they can't deliver," Amelia began. "They say they want to help, they say they care, but when things get hard, and they always get hard with kids like us, they disappear. I've had social workers quit, foster families give up, and volunteers stop showing up. The only thing I can count on is that eventually, everyone leaves." William felt a physical pain in his chest at Amelia's words. This teenager had learned not to hope because hope had led to disappointment too many times. She was protecting herself the only way she knew how, by expecting abandonment before it happened. But what if someone didn't leave? Catherine asked gently. What if someone proved that they would stay no matter what? Amelia's tough exterior cracked slightly. "I used to think about that when I was younger. I used to imagine a family that would want me even when I had bad days, even when I was angry or scared or difficult. But I'm 14 now. People want babies or little kids. Nobody wants a teenager with trust issues and a history of failed placements." The conversation with Amelia revealed another devastating aspect of the child welfare crisis. Older children, especially those with trauma histories, faced significantly lower chances of being adopted. Many would age out of the system at 18 without ever experiencing permanent family connections. As their visit continued, William and Catherine met several more children whose stories added to their growing understanding of the complexity of childhood trauma and abandonment. They met siblings who refused to be separated, children with medical needs that made placement difficult, and teenagers who had given up hope of ever finding permanent families. One particularly heartbreaking encounter was with a 6-year-old named Lily who had been removed from her home due to abuse. Lily had developed a condition called selective mutism. She could speak physically, but trauma had caused her to stop talking to almost everyone except one particular staff member who had earned her trust over many months. When Catherine knelt down to greet Lily, the little girl handed her a drawing. It showed a house with boarded-up windows and a small figure standing outside in the rain. At the bottom of the page, Lily had written in shaky letters, "I want to go home, but home hurt me." Those 7 words encapsulated the impossible position many of these children found themselves in, longing for family and love while simultaneously fearing the people who should provide those things. As the afternoon wore on, William and Catherine began to see patterns in the children's stories. Many came from families struggling with poverty, mental illness, addiction, or domestic violence. Often, their parents loved them but were unable to provide safe, stable care due to their own traumatic histories or lack of resources. This realization was perhaps the most overwhelming aspect of their visit. These weren't cases of parents who didn't love their children. These were situations where love alone wasn't enough to overcome systemic problems, untreated trauma, and lack of support systems. Dr. Williams, the child psychologist, joined them for a few minutes to provide context for what they were witnessing. "What people don't understand," she explained, "is that most of these children come from families where the parents themselves were failed by the system as children. We're seeing generational cycles of trauma and abandonment. Breaking these cycles requires intervention not just for the children, but for entire family systems and communities." The complexity of the problems these children faced was staggering. It wasn't simply a matter of finding them homes. It was about addressing the root causes that created these situations in the first place, healing trauma that affected multiple generations, and building support systems that could prevent families from reaching crisis points. As their visit neared its end, William and Catherine realized they had witnessed something that would fundamentally change their approach to their royal responsibilities. They had seen the faces behind the statistics, heard the voices of children who were too often forgotten by society, and felt the weight of problems that seemed almost too big to solve. But they had also witnessed something else, the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Despite everything these children had endured, Many still hoped for families, still dreamed of better futures, and still had love to give to the right people. The question that haunted both William and Catherine as they prepared to leave was simple yet profound. What were they going to do with what they had learned? How could they use their positions and resources to make a real difference in the lives of children like these? Their visit was nearly over, but the most impactful moment was yet to come, an encounter that would leave them both completely transformed and committed to action in ways they had never imagined possible. As their visit was drawing to a close, Mrs. Mitchell approached William and Catherine with a hesitant expression. She had saved one final introduction for last, and her obvious reluctance suggested this would be the most difficult encounter of an already emotionally overwhelming day. "There's one more child I'd like you to meet," she said quietly. "Her name is Hope, and her story is unique. She's 9 years old and has been with us for 6 months. I'm sharing her story with you because I believe it represents both the worst of what these children endure and the best of what human resilience can achieve." They followed Mrs. Mitchell to a small room at the end of the hallway. Inside, a young girl sat by the window, carefully tending to a small potted plant on the windowsill. Her concentration was complete as she gently touched the soil to check its moisture and adjusted the plant's position to catch more sunlight. Hope looked up as they entered, and Catherine immediately noticed something extraordinary about this child. Despite everything she had presumably endured, Hope's eyes held a light that seemed almost impossible given the circumstances. She smiled genuinely at the visitors, a smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. "Hello," Hope said cheerfully. "Are you here to visit us? I'm taking care of this plant. Her name is Sunshine because she always turns toward the light, just like I do." The simplicity and wisdom of her statement hit both William and Catherine immediately. Here was a child who had chosen to focus on light despite being surrounded by darkness. Mrs. Mitchell gestured for them to sit down, and Hope eagerly showed them her plant, explaining how she had learned to care for it, and why she believed it was important to give living things the love they needed to grow. "Hope," Mrs. Mitchell said gently, "would you like to tell our visitors how you came to live with us?" Hope's expression became more serious, but she didn't lose her composure. "I lived with people who hurt me for a long time," she said matter-of-factly. "They told me I was bad and that nobody would ever love me. But Mrs. Mitchell and everyone here taught me that wasn't true. They taught me that I'm not bad. I just had bad things happen to me." Catherine felt tears threatening to spill over. The maturity with which this 9-year-old discussed her trauma was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Hope continued, "I used to be very angry and very sad. I didn't trust anyone, and I thought the whole world was scary. But then I came here, and people were kind to me even when I was mean to them. They kept being patient even when I made mistakes. And slowly, I started to remember that there are good people in the world." William cleared his throat, struggling to find his voice. "Hope, you seem very wise for someone your age. How did you learn to be so positive despite everything you've experienced?" Hope tilted her head thoughtfully. "Well, I decided that I could let the bad things that happened to me make me into a bad person, or I could choose to be good anyway. I chose to be good. And you know what I discovered? When you choose to be good, you start to see good things everywhere. Like how Mrs. Mitchell always makes sure we have birthday parties even when it's not our real birthday, just so we know we're special. Or how Janet reads us stories every night, even though she's tired from working all day. Or how the other kids here protect each other because we all understand what it's like to be hurt." Catherine was openly crying now, not caring that others might see. Hope noticed her tears and immediately got up from her chair to approach the princess. "Why are you crying?" Hope asked with genuine concern. "Did I say something wrong?" Catherine knelt down to Hope's eye level, taking the little girl's hands in her own. "No, sweetheart. I'm crying because you're one of the strongest, most beautiful people I've ever met. Your heart is so big and so full of love, despite everything you've been through. You inspire me." Hope smiled and gently patted Catherine's hand. "Mrs. Mitchell says that sometimes adults cry when they see how strong kids can be. She says it's because adults forget that children are tougher than they think we are." The wisdom in Hope's words struck William profoundly. Throughout their visit, he had seen children who had endured unimaginable hardships, yet still retained their capacity for love, hope, and kindness. Perhaps adults underestimated children's resilience while also failing to protect them adequately. "Hope," William said, "what do you dream about for your future?" Hope's eyes lit up with excitement. "I want to become a person who helps other kids who have bad things happen to them. I want to show them that they can choose to be happy even when sad things happen. And I want to have a family someday. People who will love me no matter what, and who I can love back just as much." She paused thoughtfully before adding, "But even if I never get adopted, I'll still be okay. Because I've learned that family isn't just about people who share your blood or people who adopt you. Family can be anyone who chooses to love you and take care of you. The people here are my family now, and they've taught me what real love looks like." Mrs. Mitchell had been watching this interaction with tears in her own eyes. Hope has been an incredible gift to everyone in this facility. She helps comfort other children when they're sad, she shares her belongings without being asked, and she has this amazing ability to find something positive in even the worst situations. She's taught us all about resilience. But what makes Hope's story even more remarkable, Mrs. Mitchell continued, is what she's overcome to get to this point. When she first arrived, she was completely shut down. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't let anyone touch her. The trauma she had experienced was so severe that we weren't sure she would ever trust again. But with consistent love, patience, and professional support, she's transformed into the amazing child you see today. Hope nodded seriously. "It took a long time for me to believe that people could be safe. I used to hide under my bed when anyone came near me. But Mrs. Mitchell never gave up on me. Even when I was really difficult and pushed everyone away, she kept coming back every day and telling me that I was loved. Eventually, I started to believe her." The transformation that Hope described was nothing short of miraculous, yet it also highlighted the critical importance of consistent, patient care for traumatized children. Hope's healing hadn't happened overnight. It had taken months of dedicated support from trained professionals who understood trauma and refused to give up on her. As they continued talking with Hope, William and Catherine learned more about her daily life at the facility. Despite her traumatic past, she had managed to catch up academically with children her age. She loved reading, especially stories about children who overcame challenges. She had developed friendships with other children at the facility and had become a source of comfort and strength for newer arrivals who were still struggling with their own trauma. "When new kids come and they're really scared," Hope explained, "I try to help them feel safe. I tell them about how scared I was when I first came here, and how the people here help me feel better. Sometimes scared kids believe other kids more than they believe adults." Her insight into child psychology was remarkable. Hope had instinctively understood something that many adults struggled to grasp, that children who had been hurt by adults might find it easier to trust other children who had shared similar experiences. As their conversation with Hope continued, she asked William and Catherine about their own children. When they told her about George, Charlotte, and Louis, her face filled with genuine happiness. "That's wonderful that your children have a safe family," she said. "Every child deserves that. Are you teaching them to be kind to kids who don't have families like theirs?" The question was direct and challenging in the most beautiful way. Hope, despite being in need herself, was thinking about how privileged children could be taught to care for those less fortunate. Catherine answered, "We try to teach them about kindness and helping others, but meeting you and the other children here has made me realize we need to do much more. You've all taught us so much about courage and love." Hope beamed at this response. "Good. Because when kids who have everything learn about kids who don't have anything, they usually want to help. And when they grow up to be adults with important jobs like yours, they can make big changes that help lots of kids." The conversation with Hope was revealing the extent to which even these traumatized children understood the broader social issues affecting their lives. They were not passive victims. They were thoughtful human beings with insights about their situations and ideas about solutions. As their time with Hope came to an end, she asked if she could show them one more thing. She led them back to her room and pulled out a small notebook from under her pillow. "I write letters," she explained, opening the notebook to reveal page after page of carefully written text. "I write letters to my future family, telling them about what I'm learning and how I'm growing. I write letters to other kids who might be scared like I was, telling them that things can get better. And I write letters to the people who hurt me, forgiving them because Mrs. Mitchell says that forgiving doesn't mean what they did was okay. It means I'm not going to let their bad choices make me into a bad person." The depth of emotional intelligence and healing that Hope demonstrated was extraordinary. At 9 years old, she had not only survived severe trauma but had found ways to transform her pain into wisdom and compassion for others. "Would you like to hear one of my letters?" Hope asked. When William and Catherine nodded, Hope opened to a recent page and began to read. Dear future family, I hope you know that I have a lot of love to give you. I know how to take care of plants and how to comfort people when they're sad. I know how to share and how to be grateful for small good things. I might have bad dreams sometimes because of things that happened before, but I'm learning how to be brave. If you choose me to be part of your family, I promise to love you with all my heart and to never give up on us, just like the people here never gave up on me. Love, Hope. The letter was simultaneously heartbreaking and beautiful. Here was a child essentially applying to be loved, listing her qualifications for being part of a family, and promising loyalty despite having every reason to fear abandonment. As William and Catherine prepared to leave Hope's room, she surprised them with one final gesture. She carefully broke off a small cutting from her plant and wrapped it in a damp paper towel. "This is for you to take home," she said, handing the cutting to Catherine. "When you plant it and watch it grow, remember that kids like us are just like this little plant. We might look small and fragile, but if you give us good soil, water, and lots of love, we can grow into something beautiful. And we'll always remember who helped us grow." Catherine accepted the small cutting with trembling hands, knowing that she would treasure it forever. Hope had given them a living symbol of resilience, growth, and the transformative power of love. As they said goodbye to Hope and prepared to conclude their visit, both William and Catherine knew that this 9-year-old child had fundamentally changed their understanding of human strength, healing, and hope. Hope had shown them that even the most severely traumatized children could not only survive, but thrive when given proper care and consistent love. Her story represented both the tragedy of what children endure when systems fail them, and the miracle of what they can become when those systems work as they should. Most importantly, Hope had demonstrated that children in care were not broken beings to be pitied, but whole human beings with tremendous gifts to offer the world. The car ride back to Kensington Palace was the quietest journey William and Catherine had ever taken together. Both sat in contemplative silence, processing the overwhelming emotions and revelations of their visit. Catherine carefully cradled Hope's plant cutting in her hands, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Finally, William broke the silence. "Catherine, I can't stop thinking about what Hope said, about choosing to be good despite everything that happened to her. How does a 9-year-old child have that level of wisdom and strength?" Catherine looked out the window at the familiar London streets, seeing them through completely different eyes than she had that morning. "I keep thinking about all of them," she replied softly. Emma with her stuffed rabbit, those 3 brothers taking care of each other, Grace with her beautiful spirit despite her challenges, Oliver learning to trust again. How many other children are out there right now, waiting for someone to see their worth? When they arrived home, their own children ran to greet them as usual, full of excitement about their day and eager to share their adventures. As Catherine hugged George, Charlotte, and Louis, she felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude mixed with a profound sense of responsibility. That evening, after their children were tucked safely into their beds, William and Catherine sat together in their private living room, finally allowing themselves to fully process what they had experienced. "We can't just go back to our normal routine after today," Catherine said, tears flowing freely for the first time since leaving the facility. "Those children are going to sleep tonight in institutional beds, some of them afraid, some of them hopeful, all of them deserving so much more than they've received from life." William nodded, his own emotions finally catching up with him. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Williams said about generational cycles of trauma. We have the platform and resources to address not just the symptoms, but the root causes. We could make a real difference." That night, neither of them slept well. William lay awake thinking about Marcus, the 11-year-old boy who felt responsible for protecting his younger brothers despite being just a child himself. Catherine's mind kept returning to little Grace, whose bright eyes and beautiful spirit shone through despite her physical limitations. Over the following days, William and Catherine found themselves changed in fundamental ways. Their conversations with their own children took on new depth as they helped George, Charlotte, and Louis understand that not all children had loving families to keep them safe. They were careful to present this information in age-appropriate ways, but they felt it was important for their children to understand their privilege and develop empathy for those less fortunate. 1 week after their visit, Catherine carefully planted Hope's cutting in a small pot in their private garden. As she gently patted the soil around the tiny plant, she made a promise that she and William would find ways to help other children grow and thrive just as they hoped this little plant would. The first concrete action came when William and Catherine requested a private meeting with their key advisors and charity coordinators. They wanted to understand how they could use their royal platform more effectively to address childhood trauma, abandonment, and the foster care crisis. "We need to do more than just visit facilities and write checks," William explained to their team. "We want to understand the entire system, what's working, what's broken, and how policy changes might address root causes." They began by commissioning a comprehensive study of the child welfare system, consulting with experts in childhood trauma, social work, policy development, and psychology. What they learned was both discouraging and motivating. The statistics were staggering. Thousands of children were in care throughout the country, many experiencing multiple placement changes that compounded their trauma. The shortage of suitable foster families meant that children like Grace, with special needs, had virtually no chance of finding permanent homes. Teenagers like Amelia aged out of the system without ever experiencing family stability. But the study also revealed successful programs and interventions that were making real differences in children's lives. There were therapeutic foster care programs that specialized in helping traumatized children heal. There were family preservation programs that helped struggling parents get the support they needed to keep their children safely at home. There were mentorship programs that provided long-term relationships for children who might never be adopted. Catherine became particularly interested in early intervention programs. So many of these problems could be prevented if families received support before reaching crisis points, she observed. What if we focused on helping parents dealing with mental health issues, addiction, or extreme poverty before their children had to be removed from their homes? William was drawn to programs that addressed the shortage of foster and adoptive families. "We need to change public perception about fostering and adoption," he said. Hope was right when she said that children are stronger than adults think they are. Many people avoid fostering children with trauma histories because they don't understand that with proper support, these children can heal and thrive. 3 months after their life-changing visit, William and Catherine announced a major new initiative focused on childhood trauma and family preservation. The announcement was made not from a palace or formal setting, but from the very facility where their journey had begun. Standing in the same room where they had first met Emma, the brothers, and Hope, they spoke directly to the camera about what they had learned. 3 months ago, we thought we understood what it meant to help children in need, Catherine began. We thought our role was to visit facilities, raise awareness, and support existing charities. We were wrong. Our role is to be a voice for children who have no voice, to advocate for systemic changes that address the root causes of childhood trauma, and to help society understand that every child, regardless of their history or challenges, deserves a family and a future. William continued, "We've met children who have shown us what true resilience looks like. Children who have chosen hope over despair, love over fear, and kindness over bitterness despite experiencing things no child should ever endure. These children have taught us that healing is possible, that families can be created in many different ways, and that with proper support, every child can thrive." They announced the establishment of a comprehensive program with multiple components: funding for trauma-informed care training for foster families, support for family preservation programs that help struggling parents, recruitment campaigns to increase the number of families willing to foster children with special needs, and policy advocacy for reforms to the child welfare system. But, perhaps most importantly, they committed to ongoing personal involvement. This wouldn't be a charity they supported from a distance. They would continue visiting facilities, meeting with children and families, and ensuring that the voices of those most affected by these issues remained central to their efforts. Mrs. Mitchell, who had been instrumental in opening their eyes to the reality these children faced, spoke about the impact of their visit. "When their Royal Highnesses first came here, I could see they were genuinely moved by what they witnessed. But what impressed me most was their commitment to understanding not just the emotional impact of these children's stories, but the systemic issues that created these situations. They didn't just want to help individual children. They wanted to transform the entire system." During the announcement event, they were reunited with many of the children they had met during their initial visit. Emma, the little girl with the stuffed rabbit, had begun speaking again and was now living with a foster family who specialized in caring for children with selective mutism. The 3 brothers had been placed together with a family who understood their need to stay united. Most remarkably, Grace had been matched with a family who had specifically requested to adopt a child with special needs. But it was their reunion with Hope that proved most moving. Hope had been placed with a family just 2 weeks earlier, and they had allowed her to attend the announcement event. Hope approached Catherine with a bright smile and a school photo. "This is my new family," she said proudly, showing off the picture. "They said they chose me because they could see how much love I had to give. They were right. I had been saving up all my love for them." The little girl, now glowing with the security of knowing she was wanted and loved, had one more surprise. "I brought you something," she said, handing Catherine a small potted plant. "This is a cutting from Sunshine. You remember, my plant from the facility. I wanted you to have it because you helped me believe that people with important jobs really could make things better for kids like me." Catherine accepted the plant with tears streaming down her face, remembering the promise she had made when planting Hope's original cutting. Both plants were now thriving, just as Hope had predicted they would with proper care and love. Hope looked directly into the camera that was recording the event. "I want other kids who are scared and waiting for families to know that good things can happen. Sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes you have to be patient, but there are people who will love you exactly as you are. And to the grown-ups watching this, kids like me aren't broken. We just need someone to give us a chance to show how much love we have inside us." As the event concluded and they prepared to leave the facility for the second time, both William and Catherine reflected on how profoundly their lives had been changed by their encounters with these extraordinary children. The little plant cutting Hope had given Catherine months earlier was now a thriving plant in their garden, its healthy growth serving as a daily reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love and proper care. Their own children had become passionate advocates for foster care awareness in their own age-appropriate ways. George had asked if some of the children from the facility could come play at the palace. Charlotte had begun including children who need families in her nightly prayers. Louis, though too young to fully understand, had begun sharing his toys more readily after learning about children who had no possessions of their own. The initiative William and Catherine launched that day would go on to help thousands of children over the following years. But more than the programs they funded or the policies they influenced, their most lasting impact would be changing how society viewed children in care, not as damaged beings to be pitied, but as resilient humans with tremendous capacity for growth, love, and contribution to their communities. Years later, when asked about the most meaningful moment of their royal careers, both William and Catherine would return to that first day at the facility. Not because of any grand gesture they had made, but because of what a group of extraordinary children had taught them about strength, hope, and the unbreakable nature of the human spirit. Hope's words, about choosing to be good despite bad things happening, about turning toward the light like a plant seeking sun, had become more than just wisdom from a 9-year-old. They had become a guiding philosophy for how William and Catherine approached their roles as royals, as parents, and as human beings committed to making the world a better place for all children. The cutting Hope had given them continued to flourish in their garden, its strong growth serving as a living testament to what was possible when children were given the love, care, and support they deserved. And just like that thriving plant, the children they had met that day continued to grow, heal, and share their own gifts with the world, proving that with proper nurturing, every child could bloom into something beautiful.